Hey everybody, I'm going to be explaining the Cenarius fight in normal difficulty in the Emerald Nightmare. So let's go ahead and start with Cenarius. Cenarius is going to cast Creeping Nightmares on the entire raid. This is a debuff that stacks. The only way to remove this debuff is to walk into the Cleansing Ground, which will be a green circle on the ground that you cannot miss. Uh, this can go infinitesimally high. I recommend cleansing it off northward of 30 stacks of it. You can decide on your raid and your healer's skill level on when you want to cleanse off the Creeping Nightmares. His next ability is called Nightmare Brambles. I'm using Entangling Roots to represent these. What this does is it targets a ranged DPS. It'll start off with just one Entangling Roots popping up, and it'll be following you around. Not the first one going away, though. It'll be a second one, a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, continually. You're going to have to decide again in your raid how you want to handle these. Do you want them going in an outward direction away from the raid? Do you want them in a circle that you can try to easily avoid? That's completely up to you, and your ranged DPS have to be cognizant of that and aware of that at all times. His next ability is called Aura of Dread Thorns. What this means is Cenarius needs to be tanked away from his allies. If they are within 20 yards of him on normal difficulty, his allies will get the Aura of Dread Thorns, causing them to reflect DPS back at the attacker, causing your own raid to die. Keep Cenarius away from his ads. If you need to get into a pool and ads are still up, what you need to do is you need to coordinate with your off tank to move around the outer circle to not get within 20 yards of each other at any time, and that way your tank can cleanse it off. Tanks can go anywhere 60, 70, 80 stacks of the Creeping Nightmares, and they still will be fine. His Forces of Nightmare. Let's tell you what these are. These are wisps. These circles are wisps, and what they do is they seek out targets and they kind of explode, doing quite a bit of damage. The good news is they have very low health and they can be killed very quickly. I would have your ranged DPS worry about those. Next thing is a Corrupted Dryad. This Dryad does heals to allies, puts some debuffs out. She's probably the weakest of all of them. You just want to interrupt her and get her down very quickly. Very quickly for all the ads. The next thing is a Corrupted Drake. Corrupted Drake, you're starting to get into more of the damage now. The Corrupted Drake does a breath attack that can be completely avoided. It's going to target one specific person, and then once it starts the breath, it doesn't move, so everyone can move out of this breath attack. And I advise that because it does a lot of damage. If the Drake is not dead quick enough, it'll start to cast its buffet attack, hitting the entire raid. This does a ton of damage, so you just got to make sure your DPS is high enough to get that Drake down before it casts it for too long. It will cast it until he's dead. The last thing here on the Nightmares is a Corrupted Ancient. The Corrupted Ancient has a Stomp attack that needs to be soaked by people being with the tank. Tank should not take this by himself. Melee or healers should be soaking the damage, and I say not range because range have these brambles following them, and you don't want to bring them into the melee and into the tank. So Malfurion, he's going to cast this Cleansing Ground that I talked about to remove the Creeping Nightmares. He's cast this based upon the raid's proximity to the Force of Nightmare that is spawning. So there will be 3 things spawning at a time. There can be doubles and multiples of them, but it'll be 3 at a time. If you are close, this comes from a sapling. I'll use this as an example because I have the patch near the tree. This comes from a sapling. If more people in the raid are near the sapling, he will cast Cleansing Ground there. What this does is it cleanses it into one of the allies, and this is how you get your allies to spawn. What the normal Ancient will do is, if you are near him, he will give you 3% mana every second, and I believe that lasts for 5 seconds. It's a great way to get your healer's mana up, and if your healers are out of mana, then you definitely need to be cleansing this Corrupted Ancient. The Corrupted Drake gets cleansed into an Emerald Drake, which puts a buff on your tank, increasing healing by 50%, and if your tank were to die while having this buff, he would be restored to 50% health, basically using the buff and removing it. The Wisp cleanse and the Dryad helps you a little bit. I don't really, I would not recommend personally cleansing the Dryad or the Wisp because your ally isn't that good and they're not that strong to begin with. After you kill 4 waves of ads or get to 30%, Cenarius will start phase 2. So let's go over phase 1 real quick one more time before we get into phase 2. But one more time, there'll be 4 waves of ads. So it could be Drake, and Ancient. You would want to cleanse one of the Drakes probably in that scenario. So you would have a Drake and an Ancient. And then the next time it could be Wisp, Dryad, Drake. You would probably cleanse the Drake and deal with the Wisp and the Dryad. And this will happen 4 times, or when Cenarius gets to 30% health. Again, Creeping Nightmare is a debuff that hits the entire raid, removed by Malfurion's Cleansed Ground. Nightmare Brambles, range DPS, you're in charge of kiting these around and keeping your raid safe from them. Order of Dreadthorns, keep Cenarius away from his allies, or else your DPS will kill themselves. Forces of Nightmare are Wisp, low health, kill quick. Dryad, weakest one. Corrupted Drake, a lot of AoE damage, kill fast. And Ancient, decent damage, mostly soakable if you do the mechanic right with the tank. After this happens, after 4 waves happen or the 30% health, we'll start phase 2. Phase 2 is extremely easy, especially if you're a casual guild. Phase 1 will be much more difficult for you as long as you have the DPS to finish phase 2 out. Basically, it's still doing Creeping Nightmares. You still have Malfurion casting Cleansed Ground, but you do not have any more ads, so don't worry about that. Nightmare Brambles are still happening as well, range DPS. Got to keep your eyes on that. But now he has Entangling Nightmares. Entangling Nightmares is basically a tangling roots that he puts on Malfurion. They don't have a ton of health. If you get them down, that's how Malfurion will cast his Cleansed Ground, which he still casts, and that's how you can still remove the Creeping Nightmares. I would advise if everyone has their stacks pretty low before phase 2, you might only need 1 circle, maybe not even any, depending on your healers and how much mana they have. So probably get Malfurion out of the roots once, maybe twice. It'll depend on your DPS, of course. During this phase, the biggest new thing you need to know is Spear of Nightmares. This entire phase is on your tanks. He's going to cast Spear of Nightmares at the tank that has threat, and what that's going to do is going to do a massive amount of damage. You need to use a defensive cooldown, not active mitigation, but a defensive cooldown. Based upon damage taken, he puts a giant pool of corruption on the ground, which will basically kill anyone standing in it. You're on a certain size circle here. It's not huge, so you're going to want to kite him on the edge of the circle. Not kite him, but tank him on the edge of the circle. And as he hits the tanks with Spirit Nightmares, he's going to put corruption down. And if he's on the edge, then obviously instead of putting an entire circle, he's only going to be able to put a half circle down, which is going to give you more room, and eventually you should have the middle of the field to work with as well as you go around the outside. If they have a big enough damage reduction cooldown, the pool will be really small. You barely will have to move them at all. And as you have lower and lower good cooldowns to use, the pools will get larger and larger. At this point, obviously, as soon as phase 2 starts, you probably want to just pop Heroism, especially if all the ads are down. I would recommend, if there are still some ads alive, that you burn the ads down, then pop Heroism, so you can get all the damage on Cenarius himself. So basically, phase 2 is completely up to the tanks. DPS, don't stand in brambles. Get Malfurion out if your raid needs to cleanse themselves of Creeping Nightmares. Tanks just need to use their damage reduction cooldowns. Also, if you have a damage reduction cooldown for your tank as a healer or even as a DPS, go ahead and use that to lower the amount of pool on the ground of corruption, so that way you guys don't have to wipe just because there's nowhere to stand. That's the worst way to wipe. Phase 2 is super easy. If tanks can just do that, you will get it down. Phase 1 can be easy as well. Just manage the ads properly and know what you're doing and know the mechanics. Good luck to everyone, and I hope you down Cenarius. Please subscribe to my channel and share my video.